Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome to virtual IETF 108 NETMOD. Whoops, I should have said 109. I was remembering the old slide. I'm Lou Berger. We have my co-chairs Kent Watson and Joel Jegley online. We are watching Jabber and taking minutes through the online note taker tool. We welcome you to join. We'll show the link a couple of times, but here's the link the first time. It's also already in the chat session. If you click on the little chat icon, which is next to the people list, you can click that link directly. Next slide, please. So this is the IETF Notewell. It covers all of our formal IETF meetings. I think people are largely familiar with it. If you're not, it basically says that everything you say here becomes part of our public record and is a formal contribution to the IETF. If you're not familiar with the Notewell, please take a look at the link on the bottom and read it at your leisure. Next. So if you're hearing this now, you know that we are using MeetEcho. MeetEcho will cover queue control. There's a button if you'd like to raise your hand and join in. Once you're called on, just unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment. MeetEcho is automatically taking care of Blue Sheets. It's also a gateway into Jabber. Again, if you want to look at the Jabber, it's for me, it shows up as a little red icon next to the people count, which looks like we're now at 33. Please do join us in our collaborative note-taking on CodeEMD. Again, the link is here. It's been sent into the chat. It's also been sent to email. It's particularly important if you say something, make a comment at our virtual mic, that your notes are captured. So please, or your comment is captured in the notes, sorry. Please make sure to go and check that whoever is doing the note taking accurately reflects your comments. The agenda, actually I think we're ready for that. So let's go to the next slide. The agenda has not been updated, although I'll note that for the Yang versioning update, there's actually 2 presentations uploaded, 2 different PowerPoints. I believe Jan will go first, followed by Bo. And I think we still have a little bit of time, maybe 5 minutes. That's not accounted for, even though we are a very short session. So I think we have enough time for discussion, and although we always seem to run out of time at the end, but we'll try to keep things moving along with the agenda. Next, please. We've had 1 RFC published since the last meeting. Thank you all who contributed to that. It's obviously why we're here, is to produce documents such as this. So thank you again. We have 2 documents in the RFC editor queue. One is in auth 48, and I think we have to poke the authors, and I should say that I think I'm a co-author on that one, so we have to poke the authors to make sure they respond so that we can complete that one. And anything noteworthy to say on syslog model?
Only that it's dependent on the work that's in NetConf, the client server suite of drafts, specifically a TLS client server, which will hopefully be going into working group last call maybe in a month's time. So once it gets published, then the syslog draft will be unblocked.
Great, thank you. We also have 1 draft that's in IESG processing, the NMDA diff, and we have several that are post last call. We'll see if Rob is rejoined. He's actually the author we're waiting on for the first 2 of these post last call. Obviously, now that he's in AD, he's finding time to wrap things up is difficult. The geolocation, we had been waiting on an update. I believe that has been updated since the last meeting. So I think that's back with Kent. And we have instance file format, and we're waiting on an update from the authors on that. And we'd like to note that that is expired. So authors, please do continue processing that. I don't know if you have any of the authors who want to make a comment on any of these drafts. Please feel free to join the queue if you'd like to make a comment as an author on it.
We have Rob's in the queue, and also I see Balazs is queued up. So
Rob
great,
first. Thank you.
The audio come through.
We have.
Yeah, Rob, we hear you.
I was just going to quickly say on those two drafts, yes, I will try and get to those and finish those off as soon as I can. And again, the same. I know I need to reply back to Andy's comments on the NNA diff draft. So again, hopefully in the next couple of days, I'll be able to respond to that. But I may lose connection at any time, although just be aware.
Thank you. Balazs?
I fully intend to work on this draft and intend it as soon as possible. Sorry for the delays.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next slide. We haven't had any liaisons incoming. Outgoing, I believe, Rob, you were going to bring this up in the next session. Since you're having audio issues, do you want to make any comment now?
Yes. So effectively, there's been some discussion with in the packages and the versioning work between some of the authors about the Yang models that are being done within 3GPP and ORAN, and some of the approaches that they're trying to use to reuse those models and to almost like standardize deviations. So I think it would be useful to have some discussion on the list of what they're doing there, and it may be that we need to, it'd be helpful for NetMod to make a liaison to either 3GPP and or ORAN about how they're trying to reuse Yang models and give them some advice on how best to do that and what problems that they can hit if they don't change tack. Balazs can probably speak to this as well for 3GPP.
As a participant in both 3GPP and ORAN slightly, I intend to start a discussion on the mailing list in today or tomorrow about this. Basically, the problem is that 3GPP defines some standards. ORAN would like to refine these standards in some way, and they plan to use, or they're considering to use deviations for this refinement. And yep, then we have deviations in ORAN specifications, kind of like a standard. Yep.
Okay. In whatever we send formally, it's very important that we reference back to either RFCs or drafts covering the topic. And I think we have appropriate text we can reference on this topic, but if we find that we don't, we might have to generate some in the form of a new draft or an updated draft.
I think the packaging draft should gonna have such text.
Great. All right. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Up in the queue.
This is the final. Oh, I'm sorry. You're in queue?
Rob, did you have something more to say? Oh, you just left the queue. Okay, next slide then.
All right, thanks. So finally, we just want to point out that we are going to continue with this working remote mode for at least a little while. I'm sure folks have noticed that IETF 110 is going to be online. We're not sure how much longer it'll continue through next year, but clearly our current mode of working will continue. into next year. So we want to make sure to continue the energy, the momentum that we have in the working group, and to do that between meetings. We think, obviously our working group mail list is a key way to collaborate, but we also have other tools. We have both informal and formal virtual meetings that we can do. We have the WebEx available. Some groups are already making use of that. If you'd like to make use of it for informal meetings, please just let us know and we can set that up for you, we being the chairs. And if you think we have a topic, or if we think there's a topic that it hits sort of critical mass, we'll have a more formal virtual intro. Both these informal and virtual meetings are, of course, announced on the working group list and are open to all. I'd like to particularly note that that's true even for these informal meetings. If you're using the working group WebEx, we intend that we'll make that open to everyone, and who knows, you may even have someone come and contribute in a positive way that you wouldn't expect. So there are definitely benefits. And of course, there's the most important benefit, which is by including the working group, we're helping build consensus on whatever work is being done. With that, I believe we can move on. Does one of my co-chairs want to add anything?
No, except that it does take a little bit of time to flip between slides. And also, I was wondering, you mentioned there's 2 presentations for the versioning. Which one goes first, the update or packages? Probably update. So
I think update goes first, which is Jan, unless Jan, you want to correct me?
That's right.
Okay. It takes just a couple clicks, like 5 confirmation windows in order to get it to show. Almost there.
So I was picked to represent the group of people, authors and non-authors, that have been working on the versioning solution set, mostly because of time zones, I believe, because I'm in Europe. So next slide, please. It will be giving a very short solution overview here, and then we'll go into module versioning, semantic versioning, and Yang packages, and Bo will present the last piece because that's the most interesting one, where we are spending most of the time in our work right now. And this presentation here contains some background, but especially I want to spend most of the time on the sort of open questions here. So hopefully I'll get some feedback from you. Next, please. So this Yang versioning solution consists of 5 different drafts. One is about how we handle revisions. I mean, Yang has its own revision scheme already. It's very useful for standardization bodies, which typically have a single line of release, or release train, if you like, of everything. Is a very linear model. But many of the vendors that are using Yang find that model somewhat troublesome because we have several release trains going out in parallel. So like you have the 5.x line of products and the 6.x line of products going out at the same time. So how we handle revisions when there are several living release trains at the same time? That's the question there. And number 2 is about how do you name those versions? So when do you, how do you use version numbers to reflect what versions are going there and how they are compatible? And we are basing that out of Semver, the Semver concept. But Semver is also a linear model, so it has to be tweaked a little to allow this simultaneous release trains. Then we are spending most of the time right now on packages. So how can you make releases of sets of modules at the same time and version them as a group? And then we have potential operations for a client to choose which version of a Yang interface that this client is prepared to use in the case that the service supports more than one. And then some tooling for how do you compare 2 Yang models and see what is compatible and not, and so on. So that's where we are. Next, please. We have, in the summer, we spent a lot of time on versioning, but we got a bit stuck, and I'll come back to that on some slides a little bit later. And we thought that some of those sticky bits might get resolved when we were working on packages. So that's where we went over, even though we had sticky bits left. We have bumped the comparison and the versioning drafts, but we haven't really added any real information in them. It's just some editorial details and updating the XML format and so on. And even though we have spent considerable time on packages, we still see there's lots left to go there. And that's where our focus will remain for a while, we think. Next, please. And we are very interested to have everybody that's interested. We are interested to have interested parties participate and contribute to this work. And we are having weekly calls on Tuesdays, 2 p.m. UK time. Anybody can come in and contribute there, authors and others. We have a GitHub issue tracker. You can see the link there. So anybody can add new issues with the drafts there. And we see a plan that we would like to release module versioning, Yang Semver, and packages as one unit probably first, and then save this selection and comparison for a little bit later. Next, please. So let's go and discuss the sticky questions in module versioning a little bit. Next, please. Next. So one of the things we have been talking about is white space changes. We have seen in packages, and when we're discussing that it can be convenient to have a checksum of the packages and the checksum of the modules, so that we can see that things have or have not into consideration. The white space changed or not. And if we want to have checksums on modules, probably white space changes would constitute a version change, at least at the editorial level. But we can also say then that deleting a space or adding a blank line should not really, it doesn't change the interface. It does change the model, the Yang model, but it does not really change the interface that the Yang model describes. So how do we treat versioning as related to that? If anybody has any immediate comments on this, I would be interested to hear. Okay, then, next slide. One of the concepts we have revision or well, module A could import module B or version 2.0.0 or derived, for example, saying that 2.1.5 or 2.2.6 could work. But this is proving somewhat problematic when there might not be any 2.0.0 revision, and there might be a 3.0.0 revision which might not be compatible. So how should the compiler or whoever is doing this import find out what we are actually importing? And this is actually where one of the sticky points that we decided to, let's do packages first, because packages might specify exactly which modules that are being used or something. So that's one of those areas where we said that resolving packages might actually resolve this. Any comments on this one?
As chair, not on this one, but on the list on chat window, Tom Hill's asking some questions. Tom, can you speak to the mic, please?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. It was more because if we're thinking about adding white space to a model and being concerned over to whether or not this actually creates a minor version or should be a new version of the model, the question really should be, why are you adding white space now? Why would you want to do this at this moment? We can with proper change control, we can queue up lots of little changes into even a minor release, and control it that way.
Yes, I think it makes good sense to treat even white space changes as a version change, at least an editorial change, for many reasons, like version control and for keeping track of, well, if somebody is cleaning up line endings or whatever to make it proper module, everybody else should be basing their work out of that. So then it needs to be treated like a version. So it makes good sense from that point of view.
I believe so.
I moved ahead 2 slides.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know if I should looking at the participant list or the chat now, but okay. So when it comes to this import statements, that is importing not by revision but by revision or derived, we come to the question whether a change of the module that is being imported, or if you change the import statement so that you are changing the rules for what will be imported, like you changing from 200 or derived to 210 or derived, if that change in itself should be considered a backwards compatible or incompatible change. So we have option A, that any change of the module is incompatible, or option B, that as long as the resulting schema is not changing, it's considered to be a backwards compatible change. And that's the discussion has been going back and forth, and there's many small things to trip over here, but the recommendation from the group is probably option B, as I have seen. I think it's on the next slide, actually. Next, please. Yeah, so the rough consensus is option B. We think that as long as the schema is not changing, a change of the import statement itself should be considered an editorial change. But further discussion is needed, and if you have any comments on this, either now or on the list, that would be appreciated. I don't see any immediate reactions, so let's go to the next slide. And next steps is basically next to resolve these issues before the next IETF, but that's of course a hope we had for some time. But let's see if we can work this out on the list. And next, yeah, please, next again. So on the versioning, we have been focusing mostly on packages, but we have a couple of open issues that may be worthwhile to mention here at least. So next, please. There is this case in semantic versioning. I mean, there's a pre-release mechanism in semantic versioning which makes it possible to mark a particular version to be a pre-release of something. But sometimes it's possible to release a pre-release version that has bumped the major version. So for example, you have 100, you make a pre-release of something that's not compatible, so you call that 200. But in the end, maybe that backward incompatibility is being removed or it's broken or something, so the next thing you release is 110. So then from the point of view of people that are observing pre-releases, the version history goes backwards here. So that's a point. Should we allow that or not? Next, please. When we submit RFCs with Yang modules to IANA, IANA has some instructions about assigning RFC numbers and things like that. And one of the things that needs to be added to RFCs as they're being released is this statement whether a particular release is backwards compatible or non-backwards compatible. And it is, of course, possible that IANA would add this, but we feel that's probably something like, for IETF's purposes anyway, that the Young Doctors group or something would be the group to decide about non-backwards change, or whether to call a particular release non-backwards compatible or not. Next, please. So the last question I think this is should we mandate that all IETF published Yang modules should have this Yang Semver revision label or not? We cannot mandate that for outside parties, but we could decide for IETF's point of view, should we always have this version number like 200 and 300 and so on. So any comments on any of these three sticky points?
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Tom Hill from BT. I didn't mention that last time. I have a big problem with the idea of having one module being used for the export of telemetry, for example, and then wanting to upgrade to a newer model that has a new feature or fixes something. And it will take months, possibly years, to upgrade thousands of routers. So it is very useful for us to know if there is any incompatibility between versions of models. Extremely useful. There will also be, this is almost a flag as well for us to be able to say, this is going to be a hard convert between two models. We're going to have to put some effort into converting for the various consumers of that telemetry.
Very good. I think very few would argue with that. Nobody I heard, but the devil comes in the details. So if you're, it would be interesting to hear your views more in detail in the Tuesday's discussions that we have, because determining what is backwards compatible and not compatible may be somewhat subjective.
Understandable.
Yes, I think it is time for Bo to take the next part.
Kent, as a contributor, I do agree that it should be Young Doctors or some organization other than IANA that specifies whether or not a module is backwards compatible. Maybe some tooling could be used. If the tooling was perfect, then IANA could run the tooling, but the Young Doctors should be the ones that authorize the tooling.
Thank you.
Okay, so Bo, can you?
I see Rob is in the queue.
Oh, Rob's in queue?
Yeah.
Yes, he is. Go ahead, Rob.
Can I just jump in on that previous point? I sort of agree where you're coming from. I think the tricky case is that there are some Yang modules that are derived from other registries. I think of like one of the BGP ones is, so whenever they add a new, I don't know, address family or something to BGP or something like that, then you end up creating a Yang module at the same time. So I think from an IANA point of view, there needs to be some consideration about what happens for those sort of auto-generated Yang models. And there have been some cases recently where there's been a desire to have some non-backwards compatible changes to those, i.e. fixing the description statements, or in some cases even changing some of the names. So I think that whilst for most modules, I think I agree it's the authors or the Yang Doctors that should be driving this, I think there still needs to be some tie-in with IANA to make sure at the point it's published that it's always right, and we need to work out exactly how to do that. Hopefully tooling can help there.
Bo, that first presentation took longer than expected. If possible, can you run quickly through this presentation? I mean, we're a little bit over time, so please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I'm just good here to give some quick updates on the Yang packages. Next slide, please. Yeah, Yan just mentioned there's a lot of time spent on package discussion, but right now we just made some changes to all the issues that we currently discussed in the core meeting. And the major three parts that we changed since 108 is the first one is that we added a new division rule for the package definition. And then the next one is a new section that this one is related to Rob and Blush just mentioned about the different SDOs, deviations handling. So this is a new section to related with that. And then it's mainly the editorial changes, and all the discussion is ongoing, and the Github the link is below. Next, please. And here's the package usage guidance related to just Rob and Blush mentioned that packages is recommended to publish for better interoperability, and deviation should be reserved for implementation rather than specification. And publishing a package is based on another standard package with some deviation is very dangerous because they may lead to some it cannot be changed after the published standardization. And the published standard should make use of proper feature statements to provide flexibility. So this is the summary of the guideline from that section. Next, please. And then with the open issues, we mainly have the main 4 open issues. The first one is schema mount and packages. They also think that it can contain module with mount points that should be additional information for the package to have to carry some mount points information to be augmented with like a list of package could be mounted on the mount point. But currently we are still in the discussion about that. So we like to hear more feedback from the working group if on the mailing list, or right now it could be appreciated. And next, please. And then whether the package require the module revision date. Right now, we don't mandate that package have the revision date, but Yang allows module without a revision date. So we like to hear more feedback from the working group whether there could be some options, some suggestions on this. But there could be some issues that it could be there be more multiple versions without a revision identifier for some Yang module. So next, please. Then whether allow circular Yang package inclusion. We discussed this, but right now we don't have a question, an answer yet. But we think blocking circular inclusion may prevent different groups from independently defining their packages. Like, for example, give the example about OEM and routing. It could be depending on each other, but if we block that, then it should be coordinated between the 2 working groups to define those packages. Then next, please. This is the last open issue for this time, and we just gave the guidance, but we think that might be also applies to the one individual young module. So right now we think our proposal is to define new section in the packages draft to give the guidelines on the deviation and feature usage. But right now we are happy to hear more feedback on this from the working group. So that's all the presentation now.
Bo, a question on the last slide.
Yeah.
Did you talk about other alternatives? And the obvious one would be update to 8407 to the guidelines RFC.
Right now it's in the new section in the packages draft, but the Rob think if it's in the the previous published author and young guidelines, it could be quite separate. I mean, Rob, can you add something here? I think we discussed this.
Yes. So Lou, the answer is yes. We did discuss this. Our concern with adding it into the Yang author guidelines is currently that document is focused on only modules. So it felt that, and the title is about guidelines for module authors, as to whether that would be overreaching the scope of that document. But certainly happy to have a discussion as to where the best place is to put that text. Our other focus at the moment was to try and get the text right now, and then worry about later exactly where it needs to live, and get the content correct.
That's sensible, and we could always use the updates approach. We're saying that this section updates that document so that readers of that document in the future of 8407 know to look to this new RFC.
That makes sense. So can I just ask a separate question? Because I obviously missed a little bit of the meeting earlier on. Well, has there been any discussion about us holding virtual interim meetings? And is that worth something that we should discuss now at all?
We did mention that that's possible. We said that those could be initiated either by the chairs or at the request of the working group. Are you requesting a virtual on this versioning topic? Is that where you're headed?
Yes, I think so. We have discussed this briefly the last few days between the authors, and they're all quite keen that they think that would be good to have a few virtual meetings, virtual interim meetings setting up, focusing on trying to resolve specific issues. So maybe we can follow up with you on the chairs offline and try and get those set up, please.
Yeah, I think that would be great, and perhaps yeah, we can sync up and maybe send something to the list on some proposed times.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, this is Qingwu. I'm here to present the self-describing data object tags draft update. As you can see, actually, we changed the title. The original term is self-explanation. We think self-describing is a more common term, so we changed that. Next. Yeah, for people who don't know what this draft about, actually, this draft defines the data object tag. Actually, the use of tag is actually widely, used for classification, organization, and not only in the IETF protocol but also in the internet. And module tag actually is one of the example. He provided young model classification, can classify young data model into network element model, network service model, user group model. And we borrow the same concept. Actually, we introduced self-describing data object tag, which can classify the management and operation data into several categories. From this category, we can identify this characteristic data. So the typical cases is using in the streaming telemetry, we can filter the query and reduce the amount of data to export to the client. Next. So, so what is the current status of this draft? This draft has been presented for many times. Actually, we IPR call has on this draft has been issued, and we have confirmed. And we also request the working group adoption call on version 5, and we got a lot of support and also a lot of comments. And many thanks, Yugen, Niupeng, and many other colleagues. And it was a great suggest actually by the working group. And for operation type, maybe should be defined in specific device model, such as minimum value, maximum value, average value. We think it makes sense. And for this draft, it should focus on object-specific tag, and which provide the general utility. So in this latest version, version 6, we actually remove operation type extension statement, and also we actually remove other complex tag like a metric precision, metric scale, and in addition, we take out a service tag and task tag extension, because for module tag actually can be reused for this same purpose. And then we also rewrite the use cases to try to clarify the relationship between the object and the property sub-object and metric object, and give an example how to use them. And we also have some other editorial change. And next. Next, yeah. For OPM tag, actually, is the key component defined in this draft. So OPM tag extension statement actually used to classify the management and operation data into object, property sub-object, and metric sub-object. These three categories. And in this, in the left, we show the relationship between these three categories. Actually, you can see that one object can contain one or two or many property sub-objects, and one object can also have one to many metric sub-object. For object, it usually defined as a container or list, leaf list. For property, it is actually is leaf node. And a metric sub-object, we think it can be the leaf list and list, and also can be the leaf. So in the right, we give the example of how we can tag the data object defined in the Young data model. For example, we have tunnel PM module, and we have tunnel service root node, and we also have name, create time, and average latency as a child node to the tunnel service root node. So we can tag the tunnel service root node as IETF object, and we can tag name as IETF property, and we also can tag the latency, which is related to metric sub-object, as the IETF metric. Next. So in addition to define the OPM tag, we also introduce two context information. Since we already classified the management operation data into three categories, which include the metric sub-object, we can use the metric group to further classify this metric sub-object into, for example, loss-related or jitter-related and delay-related category. And another context information tag is multi-source tag. Actually, this will use for the multi-source aggregation. So we support two different types of aggregation type. One is aggregate, the other is no aggregate. So for aggregate type, you need to report the aggregate metric from one of the source. For no aggregate, actually, you need to report each metric sub-object from each source separately. So for these two context tag, it will be defined in the same level as OPM tag. So we can use tag name to distinguish from each other. Next. So this draft has been around for a while, and we already got comments from Yugen, and we actually address his comments in this version, and we also get a confirmation offline from Yugen. and we think this chapter is ready for working adoption. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to start bringing up the next slides, but if anyone has any comments on that last presentation, please bring them to the mic.
You as contributor. I did ask a question on the list that didn't get answered. I'll ask again, and just be interested in seeing the response.
Yeah, I did see you ask this question, and we actually I see some colleague actually respond to you, and for people who are interested, and we actually we can comment on that. Yeah, get a bit more feedback.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm unclear why my computer is taking forever to load up the last slides, but it's just about loaded. Okay, they're loaded. I just need to share the screen.
Okay, this is Qingwu again, and I will present this ECA policy management draft update. And I will try to make it shorter because we run out of time. And next. And actually, what is this draft about? Actually, ECA is conceived as a special case of the policy management, and it comprises the event, condition, action, 3 key elements. So it can enable the event-based management, provide a rapid response to the network events. And we use the Untitled model language to express these key elements in the ECA policy. Actually, this ECA can be implemented in 2 different ways. One is centralized network management. The second is device self-management. Device self-management can also see as distributed policy management. For centralized network management, it can provide a network-wide visibility to what happens in the network. And it may require the huge resource consumption when you're facing the massive data connection and processing. And it may have slow reaction to the network change. To address this challenge, we introduce this device self-management. The idea is you can delegate the network control to the device, so device can self-management, do the self-monitoring, self-healing, and it can provide a quick response to the network event, such as failure or error, and do the telemetry monitoring automatically. And in some cases, it may require the state to be stored, and also require some computation logic. So one of the examples is a smart filter. Yeah, we will discuss in the later slides. Next. So what is the current status of this draft? This draft actually has been around for a while. It harmonizes with several proponents ECA-related work, and we present in 106, and we actually get agreed to adopt this work and suggest to define this model more independent from the network protocol. So we did request working adoption on version 6, and we got a lot of comments, and also there's some concern on this ECA model design. So it was suggested to use XPath for logic expression, and Also, it was suggested to use a combination of XPath policy variable, new XPath function, and to bind this ECA component to scripting language. So we actually, after IETF 107 meeting, actually we discussed with many problems. We also get Andy on board and discussed with many other components like Igor, Hank, Xuefeng, and Benoit. And we set up some conference meeting to discuss this issue. We also exchange email offline. And actually, latest version we get reviewed by Jonathan, but he only focus on some abstract section or introduction section. So in the latest version, we make a lot of changes. The big change is we rewrite the ECA model usage example. We also added two new usage example. One is related to the CPU utilization troubleshooting. The second is related to the root log dump. And based on the discussion and many discussion, we think it's more reasonable to reintroduce some function call, RPC call, and to allow this computation logic to work. And we also move the notification operation as separate notification, since we believe the notification is changed between the remote client and the server. And also we add ECA function library list in the ECA model. Next. So to make sure everybody on the same page, actually, we introduce several terminologies. The key terminology we introduce is ECA event. It will use capture the telemetry subscription data source, use this as input to the ECA logic. And for event stream subscription, we introduce server event, which can trigger to generate notification for event stream subscription. For data store subscription, we introduce a data store event, which can trigger the notification to be generated for data store subscription. We also introduce a timer event and a diagnostic event. The timer event actually can allow you to call the ECA logic periodically, which is similar to the cron job task management. For diagnostic event, actually it will used to test the ECA logic to make sure it works properly. Next. So what is the use cases for these several device server management? So in the left, we introduce this architecture. So the ECA model will be populated in the server. The server will act as a local client to do the server management. It will keep track of the data object change and will trigger the action when a certain condition to be met. And so we have several use cases. The typical use case is smart filter, which actually will use the server event. And in this case, actually, for example, you can scan specific type of interface every 5 seconds, and you can check the counter status and return an array of the interface entries that match the search. In this case, we may need to store some state. For example, you can check whether the same event occur twice. So you need to define some variable we call the policy variable to store this state. And another case is about the CPU utilization troubleshooting. Actually, this actually doesn't require any state to be stored. For example, when CPU utilization goes beyond 60%, and you can output a stack CPU fan related information to the flash. And we also introduce a timer-based event and a diagnostic event. For timer event, for example, you can use the watchdog to dump the router log every 3 minutes to the flash. So diagnostic event just used to test the ECA logic, for example, smart filter logic to make sure it works properly. Next. So this is how we design this ECA model. Actually, you can see the key elements for ECA model is event, condition, and action. And in addition, we introduce a policy variable. This policy variable can be used to store some global state or temporary state. In some cases, you need to multiple step interaction between the local client and server. You can use this policy variable to store this state. And also, we actually model their relationship. For example, for each ECA entry, we will conclude one event, but can also contain multiple condition action pairs. For each condition action pairs, it will include multiple conditions and one action. But for one action, it can have multiple action items. This is how we design this ECA model. Next. So here's a typical example. You may need to suppress some duplicate event. For example, for Ethernet status down, without ECA logic, you may send this event multiple times. And so with the ECA logic, we can design. You can subscribe this, for example, interface model to subscribe specific type of the interface, and you can scan all Ethernet interface, check whether the interface status is down. Also, you can create the event occurrence counter to keep track of the occurrence of the same event. If it happen, if the occurrence time exceed the pre-configured threshold, you will suppress the event. And next. So how ECA logic works? So our idea is we will extract the standard policy variable from the event, and then we can map this policy variable into the XPath variables, and then we can evaluate this ECA XPath. It may be evaluated to be false, so we can raise the ECA exception. If the XPath evaluator is true, and we can jump to the ECA action execution, trigger appropriate action to be executed. If the action is executed, not successfully, we will raise the ECA exception again. If it can be executed successfully, we may trigger to send the event notification to the remote client. So for smart field cases, you can see actually we introduce two policy variable. We can use event repeat counter to keep track of the duplicated event occurrence time, and we also define the interface statics event and to keep track of the status down interface. So we can map to this condition. We can enumerate all the condition, and we can design the ECA logic in the left, and we can make it work actually. Next. I don't want to repeat all these issues because I already posted all these 4 issues on the list. I haven't get feedback, and actually all these issues we already addressed in this draft, and we want to hear your feedback. And can you go back? Can you move to the last slides? Yeah. Yeah.
Am I on the right side now?
Yeah, correct. Maybe move to the last slide, because all these 4 issues I already raised on the list. Haven't get feedback. Maybe people can take a look at that, and so we will keep on to improve this draft, and want to hear your feedback.
Okay, so as chair, we're pretty much at the end of the meeting now, but you said that you wanted to take some things to the list. Should that be done prior to call for adoption?
Yeah, just make sure everybody, raise this open issue. And actually, we already addressed this open issue. This just give the update. I think we also believe it's ready to go for adoption. And if anybody can raise additional comments, we are welcome.
Okay, but would you prefer to, check to make sure the issues have been resolved prior to starting adoption, or did you just want to go into adoption? An adoption call.
Yeah, intention is request adoption call.
Yeah, okay. I say this because it would be these two drafts have both been up for adoption before, and I think that there's, I don't know if it's an official or whatever rule, but there's no rule, but it's kind of the case that if something's come up to the bat multiple times and it never, there's no interest, then it gets dropped. So it may be better to try to resolve any, to ensure that issues have been resolved prior to us taking it to adoption, because if that adoption fails, then it might be difficult to bring up interest to this again. So
yeah, actually, the concern raised actually by the Yugen, I did check the Yugen actually about previous draft, and he seems okay. For the second draft, we worked together with Andy, and I think probably yeah, we can discuss with Andy if Andy has some comments on this.
Are there open comments, or the comments are resolved?
Yeah, all the comments, the 4 issues we listed here already are resolved in this version, and yeah.
Okay, then I think what I'm hearing you say is that you'd like to have the adoption call initiated for these 2 drafts, that all the issues have been addressed, and so the chairs can initiate that, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're a little bit over time, but it concludes our meeting. Thank you everyone for joining and the comments shared. We'll be posting minutes as soon as we have the time to do that, and follow up on the actions that were discussed during this meeting. With that, everyone have a nice rest of day or evening, wherever you may be. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.